Have you ever wondered what truly happens in the moments after we draw our last breath? What lies beyond the veil that separates our world from the next? For centuries, we have been taught about heaven, hell, and a place of purification, a final cleansing fire known as purgatory. We imagine it as a place for those who were not saints, but were certainly not great sinners. The souls of our grandparents, our friends, the good people we knew. But what if I told you that even among these good souls, many are held back, trapped in this state of purification for far longer than necessary? What if there was a hidden attachment, a subtle chain that we forge in this life, so powerful that it can prevent even the most devout from entering the full glory of heaven? This isn't speculation. This is a direct revelation, a sacred secret whispered from the lips of Jesus Christ to one of the most extraordinary mystics of the modern era, Saint Gemma Galgani. In this video, we will journey into the heart of this divine revelation. We will uncover the one specific hidden attachment that Jesus warned Saint Gemma about. An attachment so common, so deceptively innocent, that millions of well-meaning Christians carry it with them to the next life, unknowingly prolonging their separation from God. This is the secret that traps even good souls in purgatory. Before we unveil this profound truth, we must first understand the vessel chosen for this message. Who was Gemma Galgani? Born in Italy in 1878, she was not a nun in a cloistered convent or a theologian with years of study. She was a simple, humble laywoman whose heart was a raging fire of love for God. From a young age, her life was marked by both immense suffering and extraordinary supernatural graces. She experienced visions of Jesus, the Virgin Mary, and her guardian angel, with whom she spoke as easily as one speaks to a friend. Her body was a canvas for the divine, as she bore the stigmata, the very wounds of Christ's passion, bleeding from her hands, feet, and side. She was what the Church calls a victim soul, one who willingly accepts suffering to offer it up for the conversion of sinners and the relief of the souls in purgatory. It was precisely this profound connection to the suffering souls that made her the perfect recipient for this revelation. She didn't just pray for them, she saw them. They would appear to her, begging for her prayers and sacrifices, their forms often shrouded in the lingering shadows of their earthly imperfections. She felt their burning thirst for God, a pain she described as more agonizing than any physical fire. Through these encounters, and in her intimate dialogues with Jesus, Gemma was given a unique window into the spiritual realities that govern the afterlife. She learned that purgatory is not a place of divine revenge, but a place of divine mercy. It is the workshop of God's infinite love, where a soul, already saved and destined for heaven, is painstakingly polished until it can reflect the perfect light of God's presence without any blemish. Imagine a beautiful marble statue, magnificent in its form, but covered in the dust and grime of the sculptor's workshop. Before it can be placed in the king's gallery, it must be washed, cleaned, and polished until it shines. Purgatory is that final, loving polish. The fire is not a fire of destruction, but the burning love of God. A love so pure that it burns away every last stain of selfishness, every remnant of sin, every imperfect attachment we clung to on earth. The souls there are not sad in the way we understand sadness. They are filled with a bittersweet joy. They know they are saved. They know heaven awaits them. Their agony comes from one thing and one thing only: the temporary separation from God. They now see and love with a clarity they never had on earth. They yearn for Him with an intensity we can barely comprehend. But here is where the mystery deepens, where the revelation given to Saint Gemma becomes so crucial for us today. She saw that many souls who had lived good, pious lives, who had attended Mass, prayed their rosaries, and performed acts of charity, were nonetheless detained for a very long time. They were not held back by grave, unconfessed sins. They had died in a state of grace. So, what was it? What was this invisible anchor weighing them down? Jesus revealed to Gemma that the purification process is not just about the sins we commit, but about the attachments we fail to break. An attachment is anything we place on the same level as God or even above Him in our hearts. It could be an attachment to wealth, to power, to reputation, or even to another person. But the specific attachment Jesus pointed out to Gemma was far more subtle, more insidious, and far more common than any of these. It is an attachment that masquerades as virtue, an attachment that even the most spiritual people can fall prey to without ever realizing it. Are you beginning to wonder what it could be? What is this one thing that so many of us hold on to, believing it to be good, but which may be the very thing that delays our union with God? The answer is as shocking as it is simple, and it has the power to change the way you live your spiritual life forever. The revelation from Jesus to Saint Gemma is both profoundly simple and deeply challenging. The hidden attachment, the invisible chain that detains even pious souls in the purifying fires, is not some dark, scandalous secret. It is not an attachment to worldly riches or carnal pleasures, for a good soul has likely fought those battles long ago. The attachment Jesus warned of is far more subtle. It is the attachment to one's own will. Let that sink in for a moment. Not a sinful will, but our own will. An attachment to our own judgment, our own opinions, our own plans, and even our own spiritual experiences. It is a refined form of self-love that can hide behind a mask of piety. It is the tiny, persistent voice inside that says, "I know best." It's the spiritual pride that convinces us that our way of praying is the best way, that our understanding of God is the most correct, that our plans for doing good are superior to others. Jesus showed Gemma souls who had been generous, who had prayed fervently, who had even endured great trials. But they had done so with a subtle condition. They did it their way. They were attached to the feeling of being pious. They were attached to the spiritual consolations they received in prayer. And when God withdrew those feelings to test their faith, they grew discouraged and resentful, as if God owed them that spiritual sweetness. They were attached to their own judgment. In their parishes, in their families, they were rigid, insisting that their way of doing things was the only way, not out of malice, but from a deep-seated conviction that they were right. They confused their own will with God's will. In their suffering, they were attached to their own idea of what their cross should be, and they complained when God sent them a different one, a more humiliating or unexpected trial. This is the master deception of the enemy. He cannot tempt a good soul with gross, obvious sin, so he tempts it with a good thing, its own will. He encourages us to wrap our identity around our own spiritual efforts until we are subtly worshiping our own piety instead of worshiping God. We become proud of our humility, attached to our detachment. In one of her visions, Saint Gemma saw a soul she knew, a member of a religious congregation who had died with a reputation for sanctity. Gemma expected to see this soul ascend immediately to heaven. Instead, she saw her in the throes of purgatory. Confused, Gemma asked Jesus why. Our Lord explained that this soul, while good, had been deeply attached to her own will. She performed all her duties perfectly, but if her superiors asked her to change a small detail of her routine, she would obey, but with an internal resistance, an inner complaint, believing her own way was better. This tiny, repeated act of reserving her will, of clinging to her own judgment over that of her legitimate superior, had woven a thick cord that now held her back from the beatific vision. She had given God her time, her work, her prayers, but she had not given Him the one thing He truly desires, her unconditional, absolute surrender. She had not given him her will. Think of it like this. Imagine you are an artist, and the Divine Master gives you a canvas and asks you to paint a masterpiece with him. But at every step, you argue. No, I think this blue should be a little darker. I want to put the sun over here, not there. I think my brushstroke is better. Even if the final painting looks good to the world, it is not the masterpiece the master intended. It is a product of two wills in conflict, not two wills united in love. Purgatory is where the soul finally sees the master's original blueprint. It sees the breathtaking beauty of what could have been had it simply surrendered. And in that moment of perfect clarity, the soul itself begs to be cleansed of every last trace of its own self-will. It dives into the purifying fire of God's love, not as a punishment, but as a desperate, loving desire to finally become the masterpiece it was always meant to be. The pain of purgatory, as revealed to Gemma, is the agonizing realization of how much time was wasted clinging to our own small, flawed plans when we could have been living in the perfect, glorious freedom of God's will. It is the burning shame of having told the Creator of the universe, "I know better." So how does this insidious attachment manifest in our daily lives? The signs are often hidden in plain sight, disguised as personality traits or even virtues. And recognizing them is the first crucial step toward freedom. Are you ready to look in the mirror and see if these chains are binding your own soul? Recognizing the attachment to our own will is like trying to see our own eyes without a mirror. It is so fundamental to who we are, so close to our own consciousness, that we often fail to notice it. But through the wisdom of the saints and the revelations given to Gemma Galgani, we can identify several key signs, several red flags that should alert us to this hidden danger. The first and most common sign is a persistent inner restlessness or anxiety. When things don't go according to our plan, how do we react? Not on the outside, where we might maintain a calm composure, but on the inside, in the secret chamber of our heart. Do we feel a surge of frustration, a wave of anxiety, a deep-seated irritation that things are not unfolding as they should, meaning as we willed them to? A soul truly surrendered to God's will finds a profound peace even in the midst of chaos. This doesn't mean they are passive or emotional. It means that underneath the surface-level reactions, there is a bedrock of trust. They know that even this unexpected detour, this frustrating interruption, this complete upending of their plans is permitted by God for a greater good they cannot yet see. The soul attached to its own will, however, feels its inner peace shatter at the slightest deviation from its own script. Their peace is conditional upon their will being done. The second sign is a spirit of criticism and judgment towards others. When we are attached to our own way of doing things, we naturally view everyone else's way as inferior. We become armchair coaches for the entire world. We critique the priest's homily, the way our spouse loads the dishwasher, our colleagues' work methods, or another person's parenting style. This isn't about righteous discernment, it's about a subtle pride that places our own opinion as the gold standard. A surrendered soul is quick to give others the benefit of the doubt. It is slow to speak and quick to listen, recognizing that God can work through anyone and any method. The attached soul, on the other hand, constantly measures the world against the yardstick of its own will and always finds it wanting. This critical spirit is a clear symptom that we believe our will is superior. A third and very telling sign is how we react to being corrected or contradicted. Does our pride flare up? Do we immediately become defensive, crafting arguments in our mind to justify our position? Do we feel a sting of humiliation or anger? A person who is truly detached from their own will can receive correction with humility and even gratitude. They see it as an opportunity to grow, to see a blind spot they might have missed. The person attached to their will, however, experiences correction as a personal attack.
Their will and their ego have become so intertwined that to challenge one is to challenge the other. They may obey outwardly, but inwardly they harbor resentment, feeling misunderstood or unjustly criticized. This reveals a profound attachment to being right, which is just another facet of being attached to our own will. Jesus revealed to Gemma that many souls in purgatory were those who were externally obedient but internally rebellious. They did what they were told, but their hearts were not in it. They performed the action, but they did not surrender the will. And it is the will, the very core of our being, that God desires most. He does not want the obedience of a slave, but the loving, trusting surrender of a child.
Finally, a fourth sign is an inability to let go of the past. The attached soul constantly replays past hurts, past mistakes, past conversations. If only I had done this. If only they had said that. This is a form of trying to control the uncontrollable. It's an attempt to impose our will retroactively on a past that cannot be changed. A surrendered soul, by contrast, learns from the past, entrusts it to God's mercy, and moves forward in the present moment. They understand that God's will is found not in the regrets of yesterday or the anxieties of tomorrow, but right here, right now, in the present reality. By clinging to the past, we are essentially telling God that we do not trust His providence, that we believe our version of the past would have been better than the one He permitted. These signs, restlessness, criticism, defensiveness, and clinging to the past, are spiritual alarm bells. They are indicators that the subtle poison of self-will may be seeping into our souls. But identifying the problem is only half the battle. How do we break these chains? How do we begin the difficult but liberating work of detaching from our own will and embracing the will of God? The answer lies in a series of practical, daily actions that can transform our spiritual lives, as exemplified by Saint Gemma herself. Breaking the chains of self-will is not a single dramatic event. It is a daily, moment-by-moment practice. It is the slow, patient, and sometimes painful work of teaching our heart a new language, the language of surrender. Saint Gemma Galgani, guided by Jesus himself, became a master of this practice. Her life offers us a practical blueprint for achieving this spiritual freedom. The first and most powerful practice is the sacrifice of the moment. This involves consciously looking for small daily opportunities to deny our own will and accept God's will as it presents itself in the immediate circumstances. This isn't about seeking out huge heroic penances. It's about embracing the tiny annoyances and inconveniences of everyday life with love and acceptance. Perhaps you are interrupted while you are in the middle of a focused task. The self-will wants to react with irritation. The surrendered soul sees this interruption as God's will for that moment and offers a silent prayer. Jesus, I accept this for love of you. Perhaps the meal you are looking forward to is burnt, or the traffic makes you late. Instead of fuming, you can choose to see this as a chance to detach from your own plan and embrace the reality God has permitted. Saint Gemma was meticulous in this. If she felt an urge to drink a glass of water, she would pause and ask herself if it was truly necessary or just a whim. If it was a whim, she would deny it, offering that small thirst to Jesus. If she preferred to pray in one corner of the room but was asked to move to another, she would obey immediately and cheerfully, seeing it as a perfect opportunity to crucify her own preference. These acts may seem insignificant, but they are like spiritual weightlifting. Each small act of surrender strengthens the muscle of our will, making it more pliant and responsive to God. The second practice is the cultivation of holy indifference. This is a concept perfected by saints like Ignatius of Loyola. It does not mean apathy or not caring about outcomes. It means reaching a state of inner equilibrium where our happiness is not dependent on whether things go our way or not. We should desire and work for good outcomes, but we attach our peace not to the outcome itself, but to the knowledge that we are doing God's will in the trying. Whether we are in sickness or in health, in wealth or in poverty, praised or criticized, successful or unsuccessful in our worldly endeavors, the indifferent soul remains peaceful. Why? Because its sole desire is to do the will of God, and God's will can be found in all of these situations. If He wills for us to be sick, we will glorify Him in our sickness. If He wills for us to be healthy, we will glorify Him in our health. The focus shifts from what do I want to what does God want from me in this very situation. This is a radical shift in perspective. It detaches our joy from the shifting sands of circumstances and anchors it to the unchanging rock of God's will. Gemma lived this profoundly. She desired to enter a convent more than anything, but her poor health always prevented it. Instead of becoming bitter, she embraced her life in the world as God's will for her, turning her home into a kind of cloister and finding God's purpose in her suffering. She was indifferent to the location, so long as she was doing His will. The third practice is to embrace a spirit of obedience. In our modern culture, obedience is often seen as a weakness, a suppression of individuality. But in the spiritual life, it is a powerful weapon against self-will. For those who are not under religious vows, this means obedience to the legitimate authorities in our lives, obedience to the teachings of the Church, respect for our civil leaders, docility to the guidance of a spiritual director, and mutual submission between spouses. It also means being obedient to the duties of our state in life. A mother who gets up in the middle of the night to tend to a sick child is performing a profound act of obedience to God's will, crucifying her own desire for sleep. An employee who carries out a task assigned by their boss, even if they think they know a better way, is practicing this virtue. Obedience forces us to step outside the echo chamber of our own mind and submit our judgment to another. It is the antidote to the pride that says, "I know best." Saint Gemma's relationship with her spiritual director was a testament to this. She, who spoke directly with Jesus, submitted her every supernatural experience to the judgment of her confessor, ready to renounce them all if he deemed them illusory. She understood that God's will was more safely found in the voice of humble obedience than in the most sublime private vision. These three practices, the sacrifice of the moment, holy indifference, and a spirit of obedience, are not easy. They cut against the grain of our fallen nature, but they are the very tools that chisel away our attachment to self, allowing the pure form of Christ to emerge within us. They are the path to freedom, the way to begin our purgatory here on earth, so that when our time comes, we may be ready to fly straight to the arms of God. But what happens when we fail? What is the role of God's mercy in this difficult journey of surrender? The journey of detaching from our own will is not a straight line to perfection. It is a path filled with stumbles, falls, and moments where our old stubborn self reasserts its dominance. We will have days where we react with anger to inconveniences, where we indulge in harsh judgments, and where we stubbornly insist on our own way. In these moments, it is easy to feel discouraged, to believe that this spiritual freedom is only for great saints like Gemma Galgani, not for ordinary people like us. This is precisely where the most crucial element comes into play, the infinite mercy of God. The revelation to Saint Gemma was not meant to be a message of fear, but a call to a deeper love, a love that acknowledges its own weakness and throws itself completely into the ocean of divine mercy. Jesus did not show Gemma the chains of self-will to condemn us, but to invite us to ask Him for the grace to break them. When you fail, when you catch yourself clinging to your own will, the absolute worst thing you can do is fall into despair or self-recrimination. That is pride in another disguise. The devil loves it when we obsess over our failures, because then our focus is still on ourselves, not on God. The truly humble response, the one that shatters the chains of self-will, is to immediately turn to God with childlike trust. The practice is simple.
Acknowledge, repent, and reset. First, acknowledge the failure without excuse. Yes, I was attached to my own will. I was impatient. I was critical. Don't waste time analyzing it to death. Simply see it for what it is. Second, repent with a short, heartfelt act of contrition. My Jesus, mercy, forgive me for my pride. I am so weak. This shouldn't be a dramatic, theatrical display of guilt, but a simple, loving glance towards the crucifix. And third, and most importantly, reset. Begin again immediately. Don't carry the failure with you for the rest of the day. Leave it at the foot of the cross and move on. Each failure, when met with this humble recourse to God's mercy, becomes a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. It becomes an opportunity to practice humility, the very virtue that destroys self-will. Saint Gemma herself fell many times. Her writings are filled with accounts of her own imperfections and her struggles against her passionate nature.
But what made her a saint was not that she never fell, but how quickly she got back up, always trusting more in God's mercy than in her own strength. She understood that the battle against self-will is not won through sheer willpower, but through grace. This leads us to the ultimate source of our strength in this battle, the sacraments. Frequent and devout reception of the sacrament of confession is the most powerful tool for uprooting self-will. In the confessional, we are forced to vocalize our faults, to submit our judgment to the judgment of the Church through the priest, and to receive absolution not as something we've earned, but as a free, unmerited gift of God's mercy. It is a profound act of humility and surrender. Likewise, the Holy Eucharist is our spiritual food for the journey. When we receive the body of Christ, we are receiving the one who had the most perfectly surrendered will in all of history. Jesus, in the Garden of Gethsemane, prayed, "Father, not my will, but yours be done." In the Eucharist, we are physically united with this perfect surrender. We can ask Him to let His will consume our will, to let His blood wash away our pride, to let His heart replace our selfish heart. The struggle against self-will is the great work of the spiritual life. It is the hidden interior martyrdom that purifies the soul more than any external penance. It is the core of what it means to be a Christian, to follow a master who emptied himself and became obedient unto death. The souls in purgatory, as seen by Saint Gemma, understand this perfectly. Their greatest suffering is the memory of all the missed opportunities on earth to say yes to God, to surrender their will in small things. They see with painful clarity that every act of surrender, no matter how small, would have been a precious jewel in their heavenly crown, and would have hastened their final union with God. They are not being punished, they are completing the journey of surrender they failed to finish on earth. This knowledge is a tremendous gift to us. We have the chance right now, in this life, to do what they long to have done. We can begin our purgatory now, in a meritorious way, through voluntary acts of detachment from our own will. Every time we choose God's will over our own, we are chipping away at the very thing that could hold us back from heaven. We are polishing our own souls for the glory of God. So the next time you feel that inner resistance, that surge of pride, that need to have things your way, see it for what it is. See it as the very chain Jesus warned Saint Gemma about. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can tighten the chain, or you can ask Jesus for the grace to let it go. Let's bring this revelation into the fabric of our modern lives. It's one thing to talk about a 19th century Italian mystic and her profound visions. It's another to apply this radical call to surrender in a world that screams at us to do the exact opposite. Our culture celebrates the self-made person, the one who imposes their will on the world and forges their own destiny. We are told to follow our heart, trust our gut, and be the captain of our own ship. How can we, in the 21st century, live this message of detachment from our own will without becoming passive doormats or losing our unique identity? This is a crucial question.
The surrender God asks for is not a surrender of our personality, but a surrender of our pride. He doesn't want to destroy our will. He wants to align it with His, to elevate it, to make it a conduit for His divine power. Consider the workplace. You've worked for weeks on a project, and you have a clear vision for how it should be executed. Then your boss or a committee changes the direction completely. The immediate reaction of the self-will is frustration, resentment, and a desire to complain to colleagues about the incompetence of the leadership. You feel your work was devalued, your expertise ignored. The surrendered soul experiences that same initial sting of disappointment. But their next move is different. They take a deep breath and make a conscious act of surrender. God, this is not what I planned, but it is what you have permitted. Your will is being done through my boss at this moment.
Give me the grace to embrace this new direction with a positive spirit and to do my best work, not for my own glory, but for yours. This act of surrender doesn't make you a weak employee. It makes you a peaceful and resilient one, free from the exhausting burden of office politics and ego-driven battles. Think about family life. You have a specific idea of how the perfect family vacation should unfold. You've planned the itinerary, the meals, the activities. But then the kids get sick, the weather turns bad, or your spouse has a different idea of what relaxing means. The self-will sees this as a disaster. It creates tension, arguments, and a feeling that the whole vacation is ruined because it's not matching your internal script. The surrendered soul, however, finds God's will in the messy reality. Okay, this isn't the vacation I envisioned, but it is the vacation God has given us. Perhaps His will is for us to slow down, to have deeper conversations instead of rushing from one activity to the next. Perhaps His will is for me to practice patience and selfless love for my family. By detaching from your own will for the perfect vacation, you open yourself up to the actual grace and beauty of the present moment, whatever it holds. Even in our spiritual lives, this attachment is rampant. We might have a plan to spend an hour in silent prayer, but the phone rings, a child needs help with homework, a neighbor stops by unexpectedly. The self-will is annoyed. They are interrupting my holy hour. They are getting in the way of my connection with God. But Jesus, through Saint Gemma, teaches us the opposite. God is not just in your planned holy hour. He is in the interruption. His will for you at that moment may be to practice charity and patience with your neighbor. The most profound prayer you can offer is to cheerfully surrender your own spiritual plans to embrace the divine appointment that has just appeared at your door. The soul attached to its own spiritual schedule can end up being very pious, but not very loving. This doesn't mean we shouldn't have plans, goals, or preferences. God gives us intellect and free will to use them. The key is to hold them lightly. We should plan as if everything depends on us, but then trust and surrender as if everything depends on God. We propose, but God disposes. Our work is in the proposing, in the effort. Our peace is in the surrendering to His disposition. The freedom that comes from this is immense. When you are detached from your own will, you can no longer be deeply disappointed. You can no longer be easily offended. You are free from the anxiety of trying to control every outcome. You become an instrument in the hands of the divine artist, and you begin to experience a profound sense of peace and purpose, knowing that your life is part of a plan far grander and more beautiful than any you could have designed for yourself. This is the great secret revealed to Saint Gemma. Purgatory is filled with good people who were attached to their own good plans. Heaven is filled with saints who were attached only to God's will, whatever it might be. The choice of which group we join is being made by us right now in the small, hidden surrenders of our daily lives. We have journeyed into the heart of a profound and challenging revelation.
We have walked with Saint Gemma Galgani and listened as Jesus unveiled the hidden attachment that traps even good, pious souls in the purifying fires of purgatory, the subtle, stubborn attachment to our own will. We have seen how this attachment manifests as restlessness, criticism, and defensiveness. We have learned the saint-trodden path to freedom through the sacrifice of the moment, holy indifference, and a spirit of loving obedience. And most importantly, we have been reminded that this is a journey fueled not by our own strength, but by the infinite ocean of God's mercy waiting for us in the sacraments. This message is not a threat. It is a divine invitation. It is a secret whispered from the heart of Christ through one of His beloved saints directly to you. It is an invitation to a life of profound peace and freedom, a life lived in the exhilarating embrace of divine providence. It is a call to stop fighting against the current of grace and to allow God to carry you towards your heavenly home. The choice to begin this journey of surrender is the most important choice.
It is the decision that separates a good life from a holy one, and a long purification from a swift entry into the eternal embrace of love. To help you begin this journey, not just with inspiration, but with a concrete plan, here is a guide to put these revelations into practice. Transforming Signs into Action, your practical guide. In the next 24 hours, focus on immediate small beginnings. First, perform a conscious act of surrender. As soon as you wake up tomorrow morning, before your feet hit the floor, pray from the heart, "My God, for this day I give you my will. I desire to want only what you want, to love what you love. Send me what you will and give me the grace to accept it with love." Start your day by handing over the keys. Second, practice the interruption offering. The very next time you are interrupted today by a phone call, a person, or an unexpected problem, instead of feeling that flash of irritation, silently and instantly pray, "Jesus, I offer you this interruption. Your will, not mine." This transforms a moment of annoyance into a moment of grace. In the next 7 days, begin to build a habit of self-awareness and docility. First, start a daily will journal. Each evening, take just 5 minutes to write down 1 or 2 instances where you felt your will clashing with someone else's or with your circumstances. Note how you reacted. Don't judge yourself, just observe. This simple practice will reveal the patterns of your attachment. Second, take the humility challenge. Find at least 3 small opportunities this week to deliberately choose someone else's preference over your own, without comment or complaint. Let your spouse choose the movie, let your child choose the game, or actively use a colleague's suggestion at work. Offer this small death to your own will as a prayer. Third, ask for help from the expert. Each day this week, say a simple prayer. "Saint Gemma, you who learned to perfectly surrender your will to God, pray for me. Obtain for me the grace to desire only what God desires." In the next 30 days, work to deepen this surrender into a foundational part of your spiritual life. First, make a sacrament of surrender. Go to confession within the next month with the specific intention of confessing your sins of pride, impatience, judgment, and attachment to your own will. Ask the priest for one piece of advice on growing in holy surrender. This act of humility is incredibly powerful. Second, adopt a fiat mentality. The Virgin Mary's response to God was fiat, meaning, "Let it be done." This month, practice responding to all things, both the good and the difficult, with this spirit. When you receive good news, whisper, "Fiat voluntas tua," "Thy will be done." When you face a trial, whisper, "Fiat voluntas tua." This trains your heart to rest in God's will, no matter the circumstances, building the bedrock of holy indifference. Don't wait for the fires of purgatory to teach you the lesson of surrender. Let your life on earth become the prayer of surrender God is waiting to answer. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next revelations. Comment what you thought of this video and what city you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs to hear this message.